Okay, Lawrence. I'm gonna go through mainly the pull portion of your stroke. Um, I think there's maybe some fine areas where you can work on improving a little bit. So I've gone ahead and drawn lines of our paddles through the stroke, as well as um, lines of our lower arm through the stroke as well. So the yellow portion is kind of where we're catching in. Um, we'll talk about differences here and there, but let me just go over the lines. So the yellow lines are during the catch. The blue line is the moment the blade gets fully submerged. So when the tip of the collar um, gets right under the water line. The green line is the entire portion of the pool that is with the blade fully submerged, and the red line is the moment. Well, I guess a little bit. The last green line, sorry. The last green line on both of our screens is the last moment before I see the blade sticking out of the water again. So I think that would be considered like the follow through to the exit, and the red line is kind of the moment when we start exiting, coming back forward. So obviously, I'm doing a slightly or a bit longer of a stroke than you through my piece. I think regardless, you have a pretty good length stroke, and I don't think that is the major thing to change necessarily. You might want to experiment with slightly longer stroke if you want. But I think the biggest area is looking at your catch in the front and how that's affecting your pull. So the first thing is how you're managing your top arm. Um, you still have it very slightly, but I think you don't straighten it out nearly as much as you used to. Your top hand still straightens out just a hair as you go from right above the water into the catch. So from this position to this next position, you see your top hand move forward a bit more so than, like, if you look at my side, my top hand stays a little bit more consistent on the distance that it is away from my head. So you can see between this frame and the next couple frames, your top hand moves away from your head and forward. So what that does is, like, you can see alignment wise, if we look at just where the blade is in relation to that hooky symbol, the flower symbol, and as we go forward into the next frame that times up, right, you've already gone a little bit further. Your paddle has come in just a little bit further on the lower end because your top hand pushed forward, right? So you can still see the H in my side, but your H is already halfway covered. And then as we continue, the next thing that happens that you want to watch out for, so from between this frame and the next here, so between here and here, you're basically starting your catch a little bit early. So a couple things that are happening, right? Obviously, we see the difference between your setup here is a nice straight lower arm, and then into the next frame, your arm starts bending. Whereas on this side, right, we have straight arms pretty much all the way through that pull until we get to the back end. And you start bending that lower arm early, and it stays bent through most of your pull. So not only is your lower arm bending a little, I think that is signaling like you're starting your pull just a little bit early. So I looked very carefully at what I'm seeing in both of our backs in terms of when, like, some of that derotation is starting to happen, and you're starting your derotation just a hair early. I know it might be a little bit choppy here because both videos are moving at the same time, so I'm going to unlock and try to just move one at a time here. So if we look really carefully, the moment at which your arm starts to bend is like right around here, and that signals like the start of your pull. And you can see your blade is still sticking up about halfway out of the water, right? So I think we've talked about on our boats, like, Maybe the safer area to do that in a fast moving boat is like at least 3/4 buried in to get a pretty clean catch. You probably might still not hear churning at the speed you're going, but you're not going to get as good of a lock on your paddle if you start this early. So you want to stall that pull just a little bit longer. So two things: you don't want to engage that untwisting yet and that back pull yet until you're a little bit further along into your catch, and you definitely don't want to start that lower arm bend quite so early as well. So you can see the difference in paddle angles when we both get fully buried, right? You can see here, right, that my blue line is more positive in angle than yours. So I effectively get bigger pressure on my blade, not earlier, but further in the front of my stroke than you are, right? So one thing that's happening because you're starting your pull early, and hopefully you'll be able to see this through all these lines here. Well, I think for the sake of all this, I think the lines, we don't need the lines at this point. I think the lines already have helped to illustrate, right, what we're getting through here. So before I take the lines away, I do want to reiterate, like, the lower arm being straight until, like, literally into the back half, or more than back half, back third of the stroke. Okay, so let me go ahead and clear this. So one of the things that I was talking about with, in terms of my stroke having a little bit more weight on the blade, or more feeling more pressure, is because I am just a little bit more patient on when I start my pull, right? So if I look at between here and here, right, you can mostly see that I'm just kind of slowly leaning into the catch. And then when I'm about 3/4 buried, right around here, that's when you see that untwisting happening a little bit more. And you can really see the effect of getting a better catch and better lock on your blade by simply kind of looking at what's happening with the water in front and behind the paddle. So even though you don't have a lot of bubbles in the water, right, we do see kind of this effect where the water behind the paddle is higher in height than the water in front, a little bit more so than mine, right? And then especially in the back end here, right? So in effect, you're moving the water slightly, and also because of the way you are catching in front, I think the fact that we see the water bulging up a little bit behind you indicates that the lock on your blade is not as firm, and so the pressure that you feel as you pull through is a little bit less than what you maximally could feel if you're a little bit more patient in your catch.